Thank you for all the overly generous words. What I have to speak about is something that is, on one hand, so obvious that it should be unnecessary for anyone to speak, and yet, clearly, our community, including people who I respect as Talmidei Chachamim, somehow have failed to communicate clearly that they want people to act properly in this manner. We hear phrases of serious halachic issues. The term Mesira, which should frighten us. Throughout our history, there have been Jewish traders who went to the Gentile authorities to hurt other Jews. Today, unfortunately, it's become the banner of every sexual abuser, of every criminal who can turn around and say, what I did is nothing. Whoever reported me, he's a Maisa. And therefore somehow negates the severity of what I've done. Our concern for protecting the image of our community is so profound that all someone needs is to scream Chil Hashem, as if Chas v'Shalom someone murders someone else and no one knows about it, then clearly there's no Chil Hashem. No one knows. But if someone then goes to the police and gets the murderer arrested and protects the community from further crimes, they've publicized it. What a distorted notion of Chil Hashem. And of course, the endless use and distortion of Lashon Hara. After all, Lashon Hara is even when it's true. I have a chavrusa with someone in yeshiva at night and we're learning Hilchos Lashon Hara of the Chavetz Chaim. That's all. And the Chavetz Chaim lists all the lavim, all the esin, all the arurim, the prohibitions, the positive commandments, the curses that are given to people who speak Lashon Hara. But the same Chavetz Chaim understands very well that when there's a proper toeles, there's a proper goal, our silence is unacceptable. The same pasuk that says Lo soilech Rachel ba'amecha continues Lo samar al dam re'echa. When being silent means we allow our fellow Jew life to be threatened, then we are not permitted to remain silent. We must act. There are criteria to determine when there is no problem of Mesira and when one is permitted is not a strong enough term, obligated to go to the secular authorities. And as been mentioned, as Mati mentioned, Gedolei Olam have already written about this. Number one, we obviously have an obligation to internally deal with problems in our community. However, if we are incapable of doing so, then we have to protect our innocent and particularly our children. I have the zchus of serving occasionally as a dayan in Dinei Torah. But I can tell you there's without any hesitation that our Batei Din are unable to deal with criminal behavior, and certainly not with dealing with abusers. Will we ever get two kosher eidim, two proper witnesses? Did you ever hear of an abuser who says, bring in two Shomer Shabbos, fine Jews, to watch me abuse a child? Obviously not. Does any Beis Din in America have access to police, to people who can investigate crimes? Are our Rabbanim trained to evaluate when young children come before them who sometimes can't even speak it out clearly? One has to be trained. One has to have the ability to conduct proper investigations in order to properly deal with criminal behavior of this nature. And even if we had all those things, which we don't, what will we do? We put someone in Chayrim? We'll say you shouldn't get shlishi in shul? Are we capable of punishing them, getting them out of society, protecting those who they victimize? I'm afraid not. And secondly, the second criteria is that the person should be, Rachmana litzlan, an ongoing danger. There are psychologists here who speak after me, and they can tell you as professionals that most abusers do not stop. They will abuse the same child again and again and again. And many of them will abuse tens, some of them hundreds of children. And there's no age factor. Many years ago, when I was naive and first began to be aware of this terrible crisis in our community, there was a certain individual who was known to be very problematic, and we got him to see a psychologist, a fine, frum, erlich psychologist. And even the psychologist then, this was 20 years ago, said, well, he's over a certain age, the libido is not the same anymore. When he was young, but now he's turning 45, 50, it's not going to be a problem. We were part of a Beis Din that failed, the psychologist failed, and it took over a decade for him to abuse further children before anything was done. It meets every single criterion for when there is no problem of Mesira. On the contrary, we're obligated to go directly to the proper authorities. V'yarta hara mikirbecha. And I know some of you have read or know about cases where people who were convicted were given large jail sentences. And suddenly everyone said, I wanted him to stop, but chas v'sholem, that a frum Jew should sit 10 years in jail? That's terrible. I wanted, a slap on the wrist, something small. That individual 10 years from now is still a danger. And maybe if he's been in jail for 10 years, he won't be. And you know what else? Almost in every single case, if he would have, with the Rabbanim that he consulted, would have said, they're offering you a plea bargain for not so many years. Take it. He wouldn't be sitting 10 years in jail. He'd be sitting much less. But invariably someone says, don't worry about it. So let's not blame the police and the court system. Let's blame ourselves. Baruch Hashem, we're much better off than we were a few years ago. But as Sam Ben Heiken said early this evening, from 1 to 10, we've maybe gone to 1. He was generous, he said maybe 1.5. There's so much more that needs to be done. I see in the room, Chosh v'Yidin, I'm sure some Talmidei Chachamim. The leadership must come. Our Rabbanim must step forward and say, our greatest achrayus is to protect Jewish children. Our responsibility is to ensure that they not be hurt in any way. Rabbi Isai, and I include the wonderful women who are here because we know the power of Jewish women. If we step forward, if we demand change, if we force people to take a stand and not say, I'm busy dealing with something else, we can change the situation. Years ago, we denied there was any problem. I remember debating in writing a very chashuv person who told me, in essence, that to acknowledge such a problem breaks the notion that Torah makes people better people. And therefore, someone who's a Torah-dick Jew couldn't do these kind of things. So if there here and there are 1 or 2 cases, Nebuch, it's rare as rare can be. I don't think he'll say that anymore. The evidence is far too great. How do we deal with the fact that people look from and do these things? Good kasha. That's not our kasha. That's not our problem. Our problem is, will we do what's necessary to protect our children? And halacha demands, not allows us to go forward, to take advantage of every agency that exists, of the police department in our wonderful country, and do everything possible to protect our children.